Welcome to Art Discourse. Here we are going to chat about things that are going to be stimulating and interesting, and we are going to be whimsical and clever. Welcome to Art Discourse.
Pressure.
It's me again, I'm calling from a faraway land. Pick up the phone, I'm calling from a different time zone. Heard you are a pretty good source for major topics in art discourse. I'll leave my questions as a message at the dial tone.
Today's question is going to be a doozy of a one.
Do we know that?
Maybe. How do you organize your time between creative projects and working professionally as an artist? Brackets. Creating work as a creatives and creating work as a professional.
Okay.
How do you organize your time between creative projects
Okay.
and working professionally as an artist? So kind of like, how do you organize yourself between like projects that are you wanting to do and projects that other people are wanting you to do? How do you organize your time between creative projects and working professionally as an artist? For Chrissy and I think we try to make those the same thing.
Okay.
So we try to make the things that we want to do be our profession.
Yeah, that's a fair answer.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that we just make anything that we want to do. We often sometimes work with other people. I'm thinking the Department of Illumination. Mm-hmm. That's not our thing, but I guess we are working with them professionally. But I really like them, and so
Yeah.
I feel like it is a creative project. It is something that works within their boundaries and their expectations and their budget. But I think that for a long time, you and I tried to do our own things, but then also do professional things on the side. An example I'll give is we make art, but then we also tried to make crafts for craft sales, things that were super saleable. And I think that we have ditched that latter part. And we try to do things that are both creative, that we enjoy, and are working towards our profession. I think maybe this question comes from a position of maybe somebody who works at a graphic design firm, doing something creative, but then wanting to also be creative on the side.
I think that the time management thing is difficult if you're ultimately in control of managing all of your time. So we are in control of managing all of our time. We don't have a boss. We don't, go to a job. And so it does actually weirdly make time management more difficult. I feel
100%.
When we were teaching, it was harder to make work, but I do think that there was a structure in place so that I really definitively knew the hours that I wasn't working, or working in a traditional sense. I just finished reading the book Big Magic, and the author is Elizabeth Gilbert, and she talks about holding down a job while also being a writer and how valuable that was for her, just having the security of it, the regular paycheck. It's clearly a path that was very useful in her creative process, and it's one that I don't find as useful. I found it really difficult to manage even a part-time job and stay on top of all of the creative work that I wanted to be doing and that I had the option to be doing. I guess we were teaching, we were also running the residency, and we were trying to still apply for exhibitions and grants, and possibly doing all three of those things was a little bit too much.
I think the word that you used that caught me was optional. When we were teaching, we were obligated to be teachers. We were being paid for it. It was contractual. But then our personal artwork was optional, because if it happened, cool. If it didn't happen,
there's no consequence.
Well, there's self-shame and disappointment
and
sure. guilt.
There was internal consequence, but there was no external consequence.
There's no external consequence, exactly. Yeah. But I think that when trying to manage the time between the two things, we have always grappled really hard with sculpting and creating the time that would be for us.
Yeah.
And then giving ourselves permission to do that kind of stuff. And over the years, things have changed, and like I think we're getting a bit better at it. I feel like in the past little month, maybe it's been a little bit different, but like trying to like make sure that I have creative time for my own practice. I've been trying to set my own studio hours.
Yeah.
Trying to like be up in the mornings, and then when we like put Ziggy into his crate,
That's our dog.
we can like sit down and like draw or do something like that that's for my art practice. Talking to other artists, like, you know, I think about like Derek Liddington, like setting those hours, right? Like I am in the studio every day from like 9 until 12. I know that that's where I'm going to be. And I think that that's a good way to enforce yourself to have a balance, as opposed to I work a job that has a very structured world, and then outside of that structured world, you have to do all of the regular household things and your own personal world and like any sort of like relationships you want to maintain, and then make art. But if you give art like a structure to fall within, I think that you'll be more apt to do that.
Yeah. I think another thing from the Big Magic book that I liked that she talked about was sort of falling in love with your art and having like a reciprocal relationship. So you being like there for your work and excited about your work, but then also seeing your artwork as being there for you and excited for you.
Oh, cool.
And treating it like a bit of a love affair. So she talks a lot about how like if you are in an actual affair, like a relationship affair, that like usually you will find time for that person you're in an affair with, and you'll like sneak away, or you'll cut your lunch break short, or you know, whatever, I don't know, whatever people do when they're having an affair, but they will like carve out that space, and sometimes it's at the expense of something in their life. And so if you can kind of, I don't know if now that I'm saying this out loud, like, Elizabeth, do you think this maybe is like a bit of an abusive way to think about your relationship with your art? I'm not sure, but I do like the idea of like, if you're passionate about it and you're excited about it, then you will sacrifice other things for it. And so, you know, maybe you're, you know, not watching as much Netflix because you're making time for the studio because you want that like passion, that drive to be in that space exists.
Yeah, so just become super passionate about your own artwork, and then like you'll find all the time for it.
The balance won't even be a question.
Okay, so like that's one way to think about this question. I think another way to think about it is like, when you are like an individual and you are working a creative job, and like you're dumping all of your creative energy into a job that like requires you to be on it. Like I was just thinking about John and like working in the film industry, right? Like where you work really long hours making lots and lots of stuff, and then you go home and you're like essentially burnt out. So like how would you go about managing kind of that?
Yeah, I think it just comes back to what you said before, discipline. I think that art is way more discipline than I had ever expected.
It's a lot of self-discipline.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that's really, I guess like in hindsight, of course. Of course. You have to be super disciplined.
I think you have to be very disciplined. You have to be very clear with your boundaries. You have to be open to saying no. I think if you have a network around you that doesn't take your artwork very seriously, that probably gets exponentially more difficult. If you're saying like, no, I can't come to that event, I can't come out to dinner, like I can't watch a movie tonight because I need to be in the studio, that can be really difficult for certain people because you might be surrounded by people that don't have a lot of respect for that decision. They don't see your studio practice as necessary or worthwhile or an extension of your job. And if you yourself are struggling to get into that space and feel comfortable and confident and like, you know, you're sort of like grappling with your own dedication, if you have external forces telling you also that that's not really worthy of time, then it's just going to make that it's gonna just make it so much harder. And in that case, I would either consider who you have around you and why they don't take what you do seriously or trust in your passions, and talk to them about it. And then also really, dig deep and believe in what feels like the right thing, and get into the studio and make.
Maybe your friends aren't just jerks, but maybe they are not overly supportive or encouraging. And it is like solely up to you to find the encouragement to get into the studio. And I think that is a very difficult thing.
I think find some people that are encouraging also would be helpful.
Yeah, I think a way that can assist you in I think that you should try to set a number of hours every week. I'm going to be in the studio for, 20 hours this week. Okay, that's...
You can also
4 hours every day, Monday to Friday, or thinking about that. Okay, that's 20 hours in. It's hard to work 2 8-hour jobs and have a life outside of that. So be realistic that if you are balancing a real work, what your expectation of being in the studio is, and trying to stick to that schedule that you've set out for yourself could be really good. I would say don't overestimate your ability and say I'm going to be in the studio for 6 hours and go to my job for 8 hours. Because it's not going to happen.
Yeah. And I think also figure out what time of day is the best creatively, because if you're finding that when you work all day and then you come home and you sort of decompress from work, maybe you make food, maybe you have kids or a pet or a partner and you need to spend time there, and then by the time all that's done, you're just you just don't have it in you to get into the studio until midnight or whatever. Then maybe get up an hour earlier, and before you grab a coffee, stay in your pajamas, whatever, and go and put some time into your practice in the morning before the day even starts. Or if you actually do just feel pumped up to work in the evening, then carve out a bit of time at night before you go to sleep.
I find it easier to do my creative work earlier in the day. Ultimately, our job is creative. We have a lot of projects and a lot of things that are just really fun to deal with, and I will find the creative energy to do those even after I've spent some creative energy on my own projects. However, if I work on Sparkbox all day long and then try to do my own creative things, I'm burnt out.
Yeah.
And so the other reverse is I get to do my own creative stuff. Yeah, I might get a little bit burnt out, but with Sparkbox, it's usually project-based. We know what we're doing, and working within those parameters, it's a lot easier to be creative than versus being in the studio and making something totally new, where it definitely takes a lot of focus and all of your creative energy to get going and make things.
Yeah, we do have a little bit of a video on a series that we're desperately trying to expand on right now, called Artist Confessional, where we talk a little bit about this. So I'll put a link or a card or whatever to that series in the description or in the actual video right now.
Ultimately, there's only so many hours in the day, and what Chrissy and I have tried to do really hard is just forge those two things into the single thing that we do.
Yeah, make a list of what you want to be doing, include eating, seeing people in that list, and then like Kyle said, there's only so many hours. So if you're working 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, and it's an hour commute, and you have to, you can't afford to go out and eat every night, so you can't just pick up takeout, so you actually have to buy groceries, and you can start sort of seeing where those available time frames are.
Yep.
And just be realistic.
Be realistic. Also, you can't schedule everything back to back to back to back to back. Put 15-minute breaks in between all of your activities.
Yeah.
You're not a crazy person. All right, next episode.
All right. Thanks so much for hanging out. Hopefully, if you stayed to the end of this video, let us know what you think. You're clearly invested in this conversation, so we want to know. We want to hear from you. What are your ways of managing time, keeping yourself on track, and balancing between your work life and your art life?
Bye, everybody. Catch you next time. If you enjoyed this video, could you do two things for me? Could you like it? And could you subscribe to our channel? Both of these things help us out tremendously. A big shout out to all of our patrons. Your continued support is amazing, and we really appreciate the encouragement to continue making these videos. If you want to become a patron, you can see the link below in the description.
In Art Discourse.